Okay, there, fixed, updated. All the software's good to go. That's delightful. So today's been one of those days where I've been nervous about how this is going to go because this is not the normal thing we do. Today, I want to do some writing exercises. I want to look at some kind of nuts and bolts level writing, not so much like what's appropriate or what's inappropriate, because that's not a thing, but more like here's how to help you write this part. Here's how to write this concept. Here's how to deal with this thing. I want to put tools in your toolbox. But first, I do have to do a little bit of shameless promotion, if you'll indulge me. You can support everything, every single thing I do, for $2, $2 a month over at patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better. And every week you get, in exchange for your $2, you get weekly commentaries in different form. You get, we cover movies, we cover shows that are streaming, we'll cover damn near anything if you ask me, and I get enough lead time to get it read or watched. I'd be happy to help. $2 a month supports everything I do. Really easy peasy. And I hope you check this out. Coming this week, we're doing The Quick and the Dead, the Sharon Stone, Gene Hackman, Leonardo DiCaprio, I think, is in it, Western. And then next week, we're tackling American Fiction because the screenplay just won the Oscar. So that's what's coming up ahead. But today, like I said, we've got some writing exercises, some tools, some things to help you do better those things that you are trying to do. I've got six. These by no means cover everything, but there's six most common things that come up for writers when, you know, uh, people come talk to me for coaching sessions, or they show up at chat. I've kind of pulled exercises together to address some of those issues. Now, normally a chat goes about an hour, a little bit over an hour, maybe an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes. I don't know if this is going to be an hour. I'm reasonably certain it's going to be at least 20 minutes, but I can't say for certain this is going to be an hour. And I'm looking now to see if there's anybody out there watching. If you're watching, by the way, hello, hi, chat. It's nice to see you again. Thanks for your patience in doing something that's a little bit different than our normal Q&A that we always seem to do for writers chats. But today, I got to move the cat. Hang on one second. Today, I've got some new stuff, some different stuff, well, it used to actually be the old stuff long ago, before this chat was streamed. Long ago, when this chat was held in a Zoom room and I had a dumb, small Blue Yeti microphone, and there were no sound effects and nothing. You were either there or you weren't. This is the kind of stuff I would do. Just straight up, hey, here's how to write this thing. Here's how to get better at writing that thing. We didn't really talk genre. We didn't really talk structure. We just talked about material. So it felt a little nice to go back and kind of honor those elements of how I used to do what I do, but also sort of bring them forward into how things go now with, streaming and words and sound and microphone. And it doesn't sound like I'm, in the back of a drive-through menu or something, speaking through a clown's mouth, asking you if you want fries for that. The audio on those old chats is atrocious. I apologize. I didn't know any better. Now I do. So now we're going to go forward. I've got half a dozen writing exercises. They are fairly genre agnostic, although I'm going to tell you that I'm going to call out a couple things depending on the genre. They are also fairly sort of reader age agnostic. Doesn't matter if you're writing young adult, new adult, adult, early reader, middle grade, anything like that. Doesn't really matter. My goal here today, more than anything else, is to give you some better, very, very practical tools and practical approaches for how you want to get sort of more text on the page that isn't just, you know, taking up space and padding everything out. I really want to get you writing better. So here are some exercises. Are we good? And I want to point out, if you're watching this sort of live in chat and you have questions, just ask whenever, like absolutely whenever. Totally fine. Even if you think the question is stupid, it'll be great. I promise it'll be great. And if you're watching this sort of after the fact on YouTube, because this is going to go up on YouTube later, um, ask your questions down in the comments, because that, if it goes well and people have questions, there'll be another one of these and I'll do more and we'll cover more stuff. I also want one last note, and then we'll move forward. If you want help with your writing, whatever you're writing, head over to johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com. And I would love to talk to you about your book and getting you started, helping you keep going, helping you, pick it back up after you got stuck, helping you finish it, helping you market it, helping you publish it, helping you query it, helping you do whatever it is you want to do. I would love to lend you a hand. Head over to johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com and let's see if we can make that happen. But for now, exercises. And we begin with exercise number 1, writing just description and exposition, the body of work, getting the words on the page. This is not going to be all that foreign for a lot of people, because I've covered exposition before, I've covered description before, and this is not just me telling you to write a certain kind of sentence. This is more a sort of practical approach at getting better at knowing what to put on the page versus what to kind of leave in your head and leave in the abstract. So we've got some points to cover. You don't only want to describe the physical state of things. Here is a phone. It is this color. It has these things on it. Here is a cat. The cat is this color. The cat is existing in this state of wakefulness or sleep. You want to get away from limiting yourself to just the physical state. And yeah, I picked really simple examples to talk about the color of my phone or the cat or whatever, but that's also true for the way in which something is happening. To describe the car driving quickly down the road as part of the car chase, it's not wrong, but it's insufficient. It's inaccurate in the sense that you could say more, and you could say things more dynamically, more intensely, more visually, at least imaginatively visually, so that the reader needs, or gets what they need. They get that sense of like a complete movie rolling through their imagination. You don't want to limit yourself to just one sort of plane and train of thinking. I'm going to just tell you what it is. See this. Picture this in your brain. That's a fine start, but it's only a start. There's so many more different ways to do this, so many different ways of shaping and framing your ideas. You have to do more than that. It's not just, I'm going to describe the state of something and then move on to the next thing. It's describe the state of something and something else, and then move on. At least one plus thing, go maybe 2, go to 3, really make the reader feel like they can imagine everything. They can see it in their brain, and that these things are practical to them, tangible to them, that it is fully immersing them in their imagination, so that they're not having to plug in certain ideas to fill in the gaps themselves. Let me give you an example before we really kind of get chewy on this, or I guess chewier on this. If I describe to you the room I'm in right now, I could easily say, well, it's an office. There's a very big table on one wall. That's where the computer is, the sound equipment, the screen, and all that stuff. And then there are 4 bookcases sort of along the other major wall. And if I just stop there, you might have a rough idea. I mean, I could name check the computer brand or the monitor type or the mouse or this, that, or the other. I could give you a rough idea so that maybe you could run to Amazon or Google image search and see, get an idea of what it is. Or I could just say it's a black clicky keyboard, or it's a big gray monitor or something like that. But when I say something that just stops at brand or just stops at the general shape, you, the reader, the audience, are left to kind of scramble to fill in the details. Because if I tell you the monitor is standing on a small bamboo riser at the center of the table is an unclear image for you. You don't know what color it is, what it's made out of, how long it is, how tall it is. The fact that it's not really a table so much as a countertop, but it's mounted on legs. because I wanted a really long, wide space to fill this room. Those details might not matter. And this is not a case, just so we're clear, this is not a case where you have to get 1,000,000,000% of every idea across to the reader. Like, there's no checklist. We're not doing one of those pre-flight things where it's like, check the flaps, check the valves, check the oil, flip the switches, turn the lights on. No, this is not about getting the reader to take some kind of quiz or test to remember every detail. And in fact, writing that way makes it harder for the reader to engage with things because they got to juggle all those facts and keep them all straight. You're not trying to Xerox the image and then, make them guess or make them try to get it right. I'm making air quotes. They don't want to get it right. You don't want them to get it right. You just want them to get the majority of what you imagine into their imagination. So let's come back to my example where I talked about those bookcases. If I tell you that they are full of books or full of books of clients, even if I go that step, what did you picture? Here, you want more detail. Fine, you want more detail. They have 4 shelves each and they're made of wood. That's enough, right? That's clear to me. I know what I mean. I write that down in a sentence, or I say that in chat, or I say it into a recording, and I know what I mean. You don't know what I mean. Do the bookcases go all the way to the ceiling? How high are each shelf? When I say the things are stuffed with books, are all the books sort of arranged neatly, or did I just cram everything everywhere? Are they old? Are they tall? Is there a lot of like ornamentation in the wood? Is there any space underneath where my cat likes to hide toys and stuff? Is it clean between here and there? Is there like, is there a piece of packing tape on the floor that my cat's been playing with? Is there a chair in the way? You don't know. I know. I'm the one who said the thing. But it doesn't help me if I don't get something across to you. I was slumped at my messy desk with 2 monitors in front of me, one opened with Word, the other had John teaching me. I furiously typed, not wanting to miss any information. Something like that. Yes, that's a fantastic start, because those sentences, what they allow you to do is have the next sentence follow up on any of that information. You could talk about why you were slumped. You could talk about the mess on your desk. You could talk about the angle of the monitors and the way the light is hitting you in the face. You could talk about what typing feels like, or how you feel that you don't want to miss any information, or how frustrated you might be. That's a great start. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. You want to open up how you consider the image of the scene, whether it's a static image where it's just here's a pile of stuff, or an active image where people are doing things. Not so that you get it right, making air quotes, not so that you map everything out, but so that your next sentence or your next sentences or your next paragraph has what's called utility. Utility is the ability to go in any direction. I could go this way and talk about this. I could go that way and talk about that. I could go over here in this third way and talk about this too. Could do loads of things. That's utility. We want, as often as possible, a fuck ton of utility. It's going to make however we move from thing to thing, whether that's paragraph to paragraph or page to page or scene to scene or chapter to chapter or whatever, utility is going to help us. It helps build bridges. So let's talk about an exercise to help us build these bridges and consider the pictures we have in our head. We want to think about relationships. The relationships in space and time and personality and object and shape and color and line and all these different things, all these different ways we can make one item in one hand have some kind of thing to do with another hand and another object. So if we look at my desk in front of me, right? Here's my keyboard. If I start thinking about my keyboard, well, it's black. And the wrist rest I use is also black. There's a relationship. But if I start looking beyond just the keyboard's square, it's rectangular. There's lots of little boxes where the keys are. I see a lot of right angles. But if I look at my wrist rest, it's squishy. It's a pillow. There's curves. I can build a relationship out of the squareness of the keyboard and the curvature of my wrist rest. Same is true for my mouse. Mouse is just a mouse. It's got buttons and a wheel and it clicks and it blinks and I like it. It's very, very comfortable. It's kind of always been hard for me to find something that is both fidget friendly and useful for me. And this mouse is all curves and soft lines, and I can contrast that because contrasting something's a kind of relationship against the hard, crunchy squares of my keyboard, or how the straight lines of the keyboard are sort of like warped or affected by the curve and wrap of the cord that plugs the keyboard into the back of the computer. Relationships grant us utility. Now, the easiest relationship is just where is something in relation to something else? Here's the monitor. There's my cup of tea. Here's me at the desk. There's my cat. Relationship in space, super easy. And a lot of writers default to that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. But so often the reader wants more than that. What other relationships can we find? Well, here comes the exercise. So I've got this picture on screen, and if you're listening to this audio, I'm going to try and paint as, audible a description of this as possible. There's a picture of a woman. She's wearing a very bright red dress. She's holding roses. She is standing centered between two columns, and then there's a big arch over her head. Behind her, there is a very square building, and the whole picture is sort of shot either, I'm going to imagine it's like golden hour, either dawn or just after sunrise or as the sun is setting, because the lighting is sort of washed out a little bit. That's the image. You can see it on screen if you're watching this on YouTube or over here on Twitch. We can build a couple different kinds of relationships using material from this image. Our goal, remember, is to not get 100%, not force, not try, not demand to get 100% of this image exactly as it is into the reader's brain. Because remember, they're not here to take a quiz. They don't give a shit, and they're not going to care as to the number of tiles or stone blocks this woman is standing on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 30, 2 rows of 15 blocks sort of in like as steps. No one's going to care about that. That doesn't help make your story any better. No one's going to sit there and go like, I'm a stone blockologist, and I will tell you that those kinds of stones only come in groups of 26. No one cares. Who gives a shit? How is that going to help anybody have a better day? But if I say this woman is standing between two columns on some stone steps, that's enough. But let's talk about other visual relationships we can draw. Well, she's the only person in the space. So there's a relationship between her and anybody else we'd put in the scene. We could say she's the only person wearing a dress. I'm assuming she's a she. I don't mean to assume her gender, but we will assume for the sake of the fiction I'm creating, I'm writing a female character. She is wearing a dress. She's the only person in a dress. She is the only person visually wearing a not stone-colored thing. There's some hedges behind her. There's some green, but she's the only thing in red next to the roses she's holding in her hand. Okay, she's the only person. She's wearing red. She's wearing a dress. She's the only mammal that I see in this picture. Loads of different visuals. There's one of her, but there's two columns. There's a building behind her with 12 windows. I can make a visual with numbers. I can make a visual with humanity. I can make a visual with the fact that she's a certain height relative to the height of the columns. What else can I do? I can contrast. I can describe things based on how one thing is different than another thing. She's the only person. She's the only, not stone color. She's wearing red. The rest of the stones are beige, brown, and gray. There's two columns in one of her. She's the only thing with any kind of curve to her. Well, except for the building's kind of like background. She's got the most pronounced curve. She visually is distinct from the background. She's looking off in a direction independent and separate from the two columns. I can contrast lots of things to help fill in the space, to help give the reader a sense that there's something going on here. that it isn't just an overly posed sort of photo of a lady holding a bunch of flowers. She's looking off somewhere. And if I want to craft this story some fiction, then this lady is looking off wistfully. I don't know, maybe there's a plane flying overhead and she's hopeful this is the day her romantic paramour returns. Or maybe she's, I can't tell if she's really smiling or not in this photo, but let's assume she's hopeful. We'll make it positive. Why not? Let's go have a better day. But I can also talk about other contrasts, the curves, the way the light is hitting her versus the way the light falls on the stones. I can talk about how the columns in the arch isolate her. I can talk about how, she stands out from all these things. There's loads of different stuff here that I can use contrast to kind of ping pong the reader's attention. See this, see the columns, see the arch. Now look at her. Here's how she's different than those other things. See the buildings, see the sky, see how open everything is. Look at her body language in the photo. She's very closed. Everything seems to be looking straight ahead. The columns seem to be pointing towards the sky, but she's looking off to the diagonal. Contrast is a really useful tool that allows us to say, hey, pay attention to this contrast. Pay attention to the difference between these things. So I was going to try and say the word contrasting, but it got stuck in my mouth. Pay attention to the way one thing is different than another so that we can move with utility to that different thing. And I've called attention to it. Uncle Pete asks, will this be on YouTube? Absolutely. This will be on YouTube. Probably like whenever this is done, I will immediately upload it to YouTube, Uncle Pete. Like, I don't know. It'll be on YouTube by the end of the day. It usually takes somewhere between because YouTube is a bunch of gerbils on a wheel with string, like 2-3 hours from now. But yeah, it'll be up on YouTube. It'll also be on the podcast feed, like within 5 minutes when this is done. So yeah, you could watch this a bajillion times. My channel name. Oh, you're new. Hi, Uncle Pete. Welcome. The channel name is very simple. It's youtube.com/ and then it's my name, John Adamus, JohnAdamus. It'll help. There's loads of stuff over there. We're trying to just do something simple here, Pete. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. I hope this helps. I'm going to go back and talk about contrast some more. There's value in contrast. There's value in being able to bounce one thing off the other in order to draw some kind of connection or relationship, because that's coming next, relationships between things. Relationships matter because they'll tell us how far apart she is. That's a spatial relationship. The relationship as to why she picked this area versus another area. Why is she between those columns and in front of that building? Maybe that building is something significant. Maybe that's the courthouse where she's waiting to get married. Maybe I don't think it's a church. It's got too many windows. But maybe it's some kind of significant building. Maybe it's where the dance is happening. I don't know. She's wearing a fancy dress. A woman stood alone between two columns. She wore a red dress with roses clutched in her hands, her gaze at distance. Would the utility of relationships allow me to break into talking about why she's staring off? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely it would, because the minute you say, if her gaze is off to the distance, you can immediately, the reader's going to go, well, why is her gaze at a distance? What is she doing over there? And that's where you can go right into her thinking. We'll talk more about character thinking in, I think it's exercise 4 or 5. But yes, you can use that utility, that ability to move from thing to thing, to have a smoother segue into how the character or why the character is doing something. Now, if we look at the rest of what you wrote, because it was pretty good, you could follow it up more. Rather than compress everything into one sentence, she wore a red dress with roses clutched in her hands. There's nothing wrong with that sentence. But it didn't have to all go in one sentence. She wore a red dress. There's some a potential there to talk more about the red dress. And with the roses clutched in her hands, we could have made that a separate sentence. Because when we make it a separate sentence, we create a relationship that we're moving the camera, that we're moving the way we visualize. So we see a lady with a red dress. There's one image. Roses clutched in her hands. Second sentence, separate image. We zoom in. That's how every sentence becomes a camera. Uncle Pete, if you're going to watch stuff on YouTube, I would go looking for the every sentence is a camera videos. They'll really help. But we want to make sure, because when you compress all the stuff together, just to use your example one more time, If we have red dress with roses clutched in hands and they're both in the same sentence, you're telling the reader, hey, these two images, even though in my head I see them differently, by putting them together in one sentence with a conjunction, with a with or with an and, we're saying these two ideas are equal. See the red dress just the same amount and to the same degree of detail that you see the roses. Now, is that okay? Sure, totally fine. Maybe that's what you want to do because we want to talk sort of zoomed out a little bit, or we want to just not drill down on the dress and the roses right now. But if we wanted separation, if we wanted to make this stuff more malleable, more zoom inable, is that a thing I could say? If we want to detail this stuff, we've got to think about how to separate these images and not give them equal weight. Weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, I'm making air quotes, is the idea that, hey, I'm spending this many words, this many sentences, this much time and space on the page, so this idea has more weight than an idea I barely mention and move off of. That's called narrative weight. When narrative weight becomes important, like it's plot stuff, it transforms into what's called narrative load, L-O-A-D. Narrative load is how big a deal a thing is for the specific story. Narrative weight is how much space you spend writing about a thing. It's not really a balancing act between weight and load, but those are just two terms to think about, because when we talk about revising and editing and stuff, we often look at, well, how important is this thing? Because you spend an awful lot of words on it. And that's one way we can deal with revising. But we're not doing revising today. We're doing some writing stuff today. But for now, contrast and relationships, space, time, distance, mood, vibe, atmosphere, color, thought, anything can be bounced off or built around to connect it to something else. And lastly, context. Context for this first sort of step in where we're going, context is the why. Why? Why is this woman looking off in the distance? Why is she wearing a red dress? Why is she standing here? What's she thinking about? How does she feel? What kind of day is it? Is she warm? Is she cold? I don't see a strug or a sweater on her. I hope it's warm wherever she is. Context matters because context takes all the specific images we've got: lady, roses, dress, columns, time of day, the way she's making a face, the direction she's looking in. Context helps pull that stuff together. The context, I'm going to make something up for fiction. If this lady is waiting to go into that building behind her because there's some kind of event there and she's significant because she's wearing a red dress with roses, the context is why this is important and why pay attention. Context pulls things together. Context can come at any point. It can be in the beginning of the thing, the middle of the paragraph, the end of the paragraph. Context can be stated. You can write down it. Today's the day of the big dance. And whatever this lady's name is, is excited. We can have context early. We could do context throughout. The reader can draw their own context, but it needs to be present, because otherwise you're just listing things at the reader's face, which is great when our reader is, a child and we're just telling them like Dr. Seuss level hop on pop, see Dick run, or slightly more advanced reader stuff where we're just supposed to get the kid used to like imagining stuff in their brain. But if we're writing for adults, humans who have presumably read books, watched TV, been around for a while, had some life experience, we want to get away from just writing that is really stiff and really blocky and just detail oriented. There's nothing wrong with having detail, but when we're just rattling off, there's this lady, she's holding roses, she is wearing a red dress, she is standing between two columns. There are two columns in front of a building. Again, we got to get away from that. The big takeaway here is get away from that checklist. Get away from that mistake, that completion of idea. 100%, I got to get my platinum trophy in my video game. Get away from the idea that completion is quality, because it's not. To go all the way back to my bookcase example, the books are a mess. Some are straight, some are crooked, some are leaning, some are smushed in there. They're all different colors, they're all different things. They're stacked the way they are because of how frequently I use them. I didn't relay any of that information to you, but if I tell you, oh, those are the bookshelves where I keep the books my clients have, All those books are books people published. They sent me copies. I keep them there because I immediately have to see them every time I sit down to work. I've given you a context. And if you know anything about me and how I work, of course the room is a mess because I'm the kind of guy who desperately wants to be clean and neat and organized. It just never turns out that way because my brain moves at like a billion miles an hour. And I will, if I don't have either a very rigid system for cleaning, it'll either go by the wayside or I'll forget stuff's around. We practice description and exposition, which, by the way, are interchangeable terms. I'm going to piss off a lot of people when I say that, but that's fine. I'll take that hit. Exposition is just text on the page. Expo, EXPO. It's how the story gets out. Description is the illumination and revelation of ideas, because you shouldn't use a word to describe itself. So you can't say description is describing things. But that bringing out of content in detail is exposition. It's also shockingly narration if we have a first person character doing it, for example. All those things kind of blend together, but the internet will tell you all these things are very separate and very rigid, and we should tuck our shirts in and be dorks about it. And there's no reason to be that. We're just going to draw some images and put a movie in the reader's brain. That's exercise 1. So, how do we take this to your own work? Well, we talked about how you don't want to get that checklist. We talked about how you want to think about relationship and contrast. And we talked about how you want to set up context whenever possible. But let's add one more. Let's just go one step past that. Your development, because that's what we're doing here. When we write exposition, when we write description, when we get the story on the page, we are developing our manuscript. We're developing our idea rather, and the overall order and proximity of it, how important, how dear, I'm trying to mash all my words together because I'm nervous, how dear the idea is to us can be validated through context. So if we're describing how here's this lady, she's wearing a dress, she's standing at these columns, she's ready to go into this building, it's an important day for her. We can't guarantee that the reader will know, oh, it's an important day. But we can certainly do everything possible, as many things as we can think of at the time, to give that impression. For you, for your writing, whatever it is you're writing, contrast, relationship, and context matter. This is going to possibly change the way you picture stuff. Hopefully it does, because I want you to be able to watch anything on TV and pause it and go, okay, what do I see on screen? What's the relationship between these shapes, between these colors? Why is this person moving the way that they are? What's motivating them? What's stopping them? We'll talk more about that in a second when we get to other stuff. But you can take all these things at a scene per scene level. Yeah, I used a scene where a lady's just standing there. But you could do this for a car chase. You could do this for a fight between two wizards. We could do this for the climax of our story. Shape and contrast and context to help get our visual out of our brain and onto the page so that it can be turned into a new picture in somebody else's head. Is the context of utility to move the scene into a plot? Yes-ish. We'll get there. Can I explain more about how contrast is used? Sure, absolutely. All right. So let's answer the first question. Utility is just opportunity. Utility says basically this, and I'm simplifying a big theory down, right? Utility is, I just talked about X. Next on my list, I'm going to go to Y. Then, no, let's not use X and Y. Let's use A and B. Utility says, I just wrote a sentence about A. Whatever the hell A is, doesn't matter. I just wrote about A. I have to get to B. That's next. How easy, how smoothly, how well can I go from A to B? If it's an easy transition and it doesn't feel like it's forced and it doesn't feel like I'm describing all of a sudden like I'm going from two very disconnected things, like I'm going to talk, let's see, two things with no utility would be me talking about my cup of tea, A, and then all of a sudden talking to you about the geopolitics of Guam or how volcanoes work. Totally random thing, B that has nothing to do with A because I didn't develop any kind of relationship between them of any kind. I didn't contrast it. I didn't compare my cup of tea to a volcano. I didn't bring it up at all. There's no way for you, the reader or the listener or the watcher, the viewer, to see a relationship. If I can't see the relationship or get a sense of it, then there's low utility. High utility means I've got a better chance of smoothly moving from idea A to idea B. And how well I move from A to B to C to D to F and Q and all that gives us a chance to link these whatever things together, whether they're objects or ideas or scenes or what, or who knows, to turn these things into a plot. Think about links in a chain. If I'm linking literal pieces of metal together and I make one that's all weird and fucked up, it's going to be hard to connect it to the other ones because it doesn't easily fit. I want to try to not so much make everything uniform because we're not making widgets at the factory, but I definitely want to make it in such a way where I have the ability to connect one thing to the next. Utility is a link. That's a great way to put it. Now, your second question was about contrast. Contrast is just talking about differences. I'm tall, that person is short. Those columns are old, I'm less old than those columns. Hungry versus, satisfied. Contrast is about difference. Any kind of difference. Why would we bring difference up? Why does that matter? Because sometimes when we describe something and then talk about the opposite or what's different from it, or we get a clearer sense of it. So if I tell you that, let me think of an example. My car is the only car on the road right now that doesn't have an engine that sounds like an angry teenager. I've given you contrast. I've said, well, everybody else operates this way. I operate that way. And it helps you understand how I'm different. Or if we use Uncle Pete's comment here just below yours, I love the way you're explaining things. It doesn't feel overwhelming. Here's some contrast. Loads of writing advice can feel easily overwhelming because it's incredibly vague, because nobody really wants to like put a flag in anything and make a point out of the fear that they'll get criticized or it'll be, you'll discover that they only have the same like 10 fucking things to say all the time. I, having 26 plus years of experience helping writers write better, have way more than 10 things to say in way more ways. So I stand out. That's contrast. That contrast helps you, the listener, get a better view on what it is I'm trying to talk about. And Pete, I'm very glad you don't find this overwhelming. This should not be overwhelming. It's not, you're not bad, wrong, or stupid that you felt overwhelmed in the past. That happens. There's a lot of information. It's all coming at your face. It's that this should since the beginning, this should have always been presented to you in a way that clicks with you. And whoever taught you needs to meet you where you're at your level to help you do this better. Everybody's different, but the person dispensing the information should ideally be flexible enough to know that, okay, when I talk to Pete, I'm going to go this way. When I talk to somebody else, I'm going to go that way. And everybody still gets what they need out of it. That's contrast. Shall we keep going? Because we got way more. Number 2, how to write dialogue. Okay. This one, like I practiced this one. I ran this past some people this morning and they told me that it was like they expected something really obvious and that how I explained it, it wasn't obvious. So I'm curious to know as I get a mouthful of tea, if you think this is obvious or not. And if you're a longtime listener or you've been here before, you've heard me say this in some way, shape, or form, but I'd like to go into some depth about it today. Dialogue, sound coming out of people's faces. Talking is all about how people react to what's going on around them and who's around them. Dialogue is reaction, period. I will die on this hill. I don't care if you're about to point out that in chapter 7 you have a character stand up and like scream the plot at the rest of the townsfolk in the fantasy village, because there's an underlying question about, well, why are they screaming that big giant paragraph about how they have to go on a noble quest? Dialogue always reveals something about character in that moment, and also about the character overall as a whole. So we've got that fantasy character standing up in the tavern screaming about how they will be the one to draw the sword out of the rock and go fight the dragon on, the other side of the whatever. Why is the character doing that in that moment? You, the writer, should know, and the answer should not be, because if they don't do it, John, then there's no plot, because that is a bad answer to that question. That is just an inarticulate kind of like obvious answer. Like, of course, if nobody does anything in the story, there's no plot. But I'd like for you to go past that. I'd like for you to dig in. I'd like for you to do more than that. The rule I always tell everybody, and this is where I really stand out, contrast from everybody else, is that I'll tell you that plot doesn't happen in dialogue. I'd like to explain. Plot doesn't happen in dialogue because as long as I'm talking about something, I'm not doing it. So the difference between saying, I am going to cook dinner, and here's what I'm making for dinner, and there's this, and it has this, and it has this ingredient, and it does that. But me telling you what dinner is, and me telling you that I am going to cook it later, does not actually cook the food. It does not actually prepare it. It doesn't season it. It doesn't put it in the oven. It doesn't light my oven. Plot doesn't live in dialogue because it's not the same as people talking. It's not the same as reacting. Plot is information that happens. And we'll talk about that when we talk about character internals and goals and stuff. But it is very uncomfortable, really weird, really inhuman, really unnatural for you, for instance, to just verbalize out loud to random people around you what it is you're doing and what it is you're going to be doing in the next 5 minutes. It's difficult to make that sound natural. It's one thing if you're like, hang on a minute, I have to go answer the phone. That's not plot. I mean, it can be, but that's a little bit more natural. I mean, like, you wouldn't stand up and explain to somebody, what I am going to do now after I am done listening to this recording is that I am going to go to the store and I'm going to buy a steno pad and a box of pens. And then I am coming home, returning to my palace where I feel safe, and I will sit down and write. Because that sounds crazy. That just sounds weird. Plot should not live in your dialogue. People know what they're doing. You don't have to stop and go, what we are trying to do right now is go across the forest and go fight the dragon. They know why they're walking. They know why they have their swords. They know what the plan is. You don't have to explain it to anybody. You're doing it. Plot doesn't have to live in dialogue. The first major rule of dialogue is that dialogue should always sound like people talking. Should always just be smooth, fluid, natural. Even if the beings doing the speaking are robots or aliens or fantasy humans. I don't mean they should use modern vernacular. That's always the shortcut people always say when I say plot should sound like people talking. They always think I mean they should sound like modern regular people. That's not what I mean. I mean, you can totally have your elves turn around and like say, hey, Bob, did you see Kevin? Kevin seems kind of sus. You could totally have that happen. Sure, why not? Who gives a shit? But it's not the point. You just need them to sound as though the way they verbally communicate to one another is natural, rhythmic, fluid, and, bendy. It sounds regular. It has motility. It doesn't sound stiff and forced as though we're all reading badly off a script. The more local and immediate, those are the two terms that we use to determine dialogue construction. Local is what's happening around us right now. I'm talking about the stuff that just happened to us, give or take a certain amount of time. It's more common. It's more normal. We have to be specifically asked or prompted or affected for us to talk about something a distance away. I'm more likely to tell you about what's going on right now than I am to tell you what happened 7 hours ago. And immediate is the stuff immediately around us, physically around us. I know it seems like it should be the other way around. I didn't invent these terms. That's just how they're labeled. Local and immediate has to do with the stuff around us in the short term and just our relative surroundings or relative situation. That's the easiest way to think about it. You can get better natural sound if we stay in a small bubble around our character. Here's what's been going on lately. Here's what's happening around me. Done. It will always sound more natural that way. Now, if something big and external and crazy happened 7 hours ago and holy shit, I have to talk about it. Sure, yes, that's going to interrupt everything and be a reason to bring it out in dialogue. But if we're just sitting here talking, we're just sitting here hanging out, and we're not desperately groping for something to say, and we're just chatting, more than likely, we are going to talk about what's local and immediate and only bring something else in when we are looking to convey something, emotion, feeling, uh, memory, atmosphere, something significant. So let's say you and I are sitting here talking and there's a lull in the conversation. So you decide you're going to pull out a memory or an anecdote or something that you think I would find enjoyable because we're just chatting. That pull, that reach back through time and space and memory is going to reveal something about you. Now, it's not going to affect our immediate situation. We're just sitting here talking. It's not particularly local. You know, you're telling me about something that happened 6 months ago, let's say, but you're hoping that by bringing this up in dialogue, it has an impact. It influences conversation. It makes me feel a certain way. It gives me a reaction. Dialogue always communicates more than words because dialogue is a reaction that is revelatory. It reveals something. It's going to reveal something about the speaker. It's going to reveal something about the listener. It's going to reveal something about the mood, the vibe, the moment, whatever. There should always be a revelation and there should always be a reaction. Prompting it as a result of it, there's always something to look for. Nobody just talks in a vacuum. So here's our exercise. Here's our picture. It's a bunch of people talking. They are all holding beverages. I presume they are beers or mixed drinks of some kind. They are sitting outside. I would imagine, based on their dress, seems to be warm because none of them are wearing like big, heavy jackets. And they all seem to be enjoying each other's company. They're laughing. They're smiling. So when we have a scene with talking, we want to build some building blocks. We want to make that talk. We want to focus the reader not just on the sentences that appear in quotes, because if we only focus on that to the exclusion of everything else, it's going to feel like we're reading a screenplay. Now, there's a time and place to talk screenplay. I'd be happy to talk screenplay, but this is not screenplay time. This is novel time. So we have to think about more than just sticking everything in quotes and making that the big deal on the page. It's important. No doubt it's important, but it's not the only thing we're talking about. So we start here where we ended last time. Context. People talk when there's a reason to. So this situation with our picture, these four, I presume they are women, are sitting talking. They seem to be having a good time, so I assume the context is that this is a positive meeting of four people. Although they are paired off 2 by 2, 2 people on one side, 2 people on the other side of the photo, I would assume they all know each other because the middle 2 people are sitting pretty close. 3 of the 4 are sitting pretty close to one another. I can draw a context from that. I can develop some kind of fiction around the context for that. Now, up next, once we keep context in mind, why are these people in the place they are? Why are they saying the things they're saying? Now we can start looking at what they're saying, the specific words. We want to start next with tone. How is something being said? How is something heard? That tone helps shape reaction because if I say something to you and, we're both laughing, we're joking around, it's no big deal. The tone is very light. But if the tone gets serious, I could say the same sentence, but it'll have a different reaction from you. Because if I laugh and go, oh, never do that again, it's fun, whatever, it's no big deal. But if I get serious, never do that again, and I change the way I deliver it, my tone is changed. And hopefully the reaction I get, my intention has changed. Because your original reaction might be, oh, ha ha ha, no problem. But if I get serious, your reaction should be ideally equally serious, because that's what I want. Always think about tone. Now, how tone is communicated by, how do I put this nicely? Possibly inexperienced writers or lazy writers would be through adverbs. Everybody wants to grab an adverb first. Now, there's nothing wrong with an adverb. Adverbs are delightful, but they are not the only way to communicate tone. They are sort of like the first step in communicating tone. There are so many others. Can you use them? Sure. It's not the end of the world, but they are not as clear and precise as you might think. Because if I say, I went quickly up the stairs, that doesn't entirely cover the rate at which I moved, just that I moved. I waited for hours and he never shows. Stacy sipped her beer. Angela flicked hair from her face and looked above the rim of her glasses. That could never be me. Could tone be communicated through action? Yes, tone is totally communicated through action. Think about how when we're talking to one another, we tend to make gestures. You know, when we make a dismissive gesture, a wave of our hand, that guy's an asshole. We flick it away. Or, you know, we indicate like, oh no, stop talking. Oh no, we put our hands out flat. Absolutely think about how action communicates tone. We were going to come to that when we got down to emotion. But yeah, tone can be communicated through action just as easily through a dialogue verb. But the idea here is that everything has a tone, not just the serious stuff, not just the very funny stuff. There's always a tone. Very rarely is something going to be delivered flat. Usually, if it's going to come out flat, there's a reason. But there's always a sound. There's always an impression to make with the dialogue and through the dialogue. Tone is not the summary of dialogue. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's not the only thing I want you taking away from hearing this character talk. But tone is part of the vehicle that helps deliver it. They're saying this stuff. The tone sounds serious. Therefore, what they're talking about must be important, because we don't talk about unserious things in a serious way. That would be weird. So this must be important. The reader, will pay attention to what they're saying. Maybe it's important. Maybe it reveals some character detail about them. Because remember, all dialogue reveals something. So that part of that big blurb that the knight gave right before they go fight the dragon, where they're like, you know, we shall fight until the very last of us, for we are brave and true, and we will defend our village. And, you know, never in the eras has any one man done a thing without the help and support of their friends. That big hero speech they gave, that's important. And the tone in which that knight delivers it reveals something about how much they believe in themselves, or how thankful they are, or maybe how scared they are because they just keep fucking rambling. There's always a revelation, and there's always a tone. And now, third thing, there's always a goal. We'll talk more about goals later when we get into motivation and internals and stuff. But we only talk when there's a goal. We only communicate to one another with a goal in mind. Nobody ever just says shit. Even the most random thing, even the most throwaway line, there's always a goal. I'm trying to communicate information to you so that you know something. I'm trying to express how I feel so that I feel heard or responded to, or so that I can connect with you in some way. There's always a goal. Identifying that goal can help make the context, we're going to work backwards for a second, can make that context feel more substantial. Because if we go back to our picture and one of these four women, you know, let's say it's the woman who's got her back sort of turned to us in the shot, she's facing the other three. If they're, you know, all three of them are hearing her speak and it's something serious, like Brad broke up with her and they all hate Brad. Her goal was to have her friends support her. The context is the situation that's going on and why she felt the need to call her friends together and have them meet for a drink. And the tone is how she's delivering the story, but the tone is also in how they reply, where it seems like definitely two of these women are outright laughing and the third one's definitely smiling. So maybe while our woman with her back to us is sort of like trashing Brad because Brad's an asshole, these other women are having a moment like, God, Brad really does suck. There's always a goal. One more thing to consider when it comes to writing dialogue: emotion. There's a couple different kinds of emotion that come into play when we talk about dialogue. There's delivery emotion, which is how is this thing being said? Or if we want to draw the question out, how does the character feel who is doing the talking? That's how they taught it to me back in the 90s. The character feels a certain way that impacts their tone, but they've got an emotion at the core of them. They feel sad. Therefore, they say this way. And there is a receiving emotion, delivery, reception. The person on the other end feels a certain way to begin with pre-talking. So before this lady started talking shit about Brad, everybody had a mood, a vibe. And now hearing this Brad story, one of them is laughing. Their emotional state has changed. Finding the balance between how somebody's talking and how somebody's listening to it will help you figure out what their reaction should be. And remember, goal can be influenced by emotion. If I'm upset, maybe my goal is to just burn off that anger and deal with that frustration and then heave a big sigh and go do something. All these things kind of weave together in a little bow, in a little knot. And it's our job to help untangle this, to get this across. It's never just character A to character B to character C talking. I say, you say, I say, you say, back and forth. It's never just that. It might be that on the surface, but it's never that in totality. Dialogue is incredibly powerful because it is a reaction, because it does reveal things about our characters. Shall we go on? Shall we hit the third exercise? Are we doing good? Questions so far? So how does this deal with our own work? I sort of blended that together with the last part. We want to think more than just, I have to deliver this amount of information to the reader. They have to know about the horse. They have to know about the car. They have to know stuff. Yeah, they do have to know that stuff. But we're not standing in front of the class reading a book report. We're not delivering it to them on the nightly news, reading a teleprompter with our shirt tucked in. You want to be able to shape and frame your people and reveal stuff of your characters and of your world based on how people talk. And Pete, I know, I agree with you. It is a lot. And I am, if you start watching material, I dump a lot into one spot. It's kind of my thing. But you're getting it, and I'm happy you're getting it. And yes, dialogue has to sound like how people talk, which means one of the ways we can practice this is go listen to people. You know, we often talk about people watching. You know, it's a little harder to do in the era where there is a plague and not many people go out. But you can watch TV. You can listen to your neighbors. You can go to the grocery store and hear people bitch, piss, and moan about the price of, like, why are Doritos $11 a bag? Listen to what they're saying. If you were to write down what they were saying, you wouldn't only transcribe the words they said. That's what closed captions do. They just transcribe the specific words. But how is it said? When I said, oh my God, Doritos are $11 a bag, there's a goal, there's an emotion there, right? There's a tone. You heard a tone, and that speaks to the emotion I have. And the fact that I'm saying it there has to be a goal. Why the hell is John standing in the grocery store aisle saying, holy shit, Doritos are $11 a bag? Actually, my whole sentence was, are you fucking kidding me? Doritos are $11 a bag. There's always a goal. Find the emotion and find the tone. If you need to, work backwards. Find the tone first to figure out the emotion. And understand that context is going to give you those three things. Here we are in the grocery store. There's our context. Here's the situation. Here's what's happening. Here's what somebody's saying. What's their emotion? What's their goal? Take it apart. Take your time. We will talk later about right and wrong ways to do it because they're super not helpful, but the internet lives and dies with that shit. But it's a matter of understanding that you can take any situation apart like that. Why is he saying it that way? What are the person's goals? What do they want? How, if they feel that way here, how else might they feel later? If our character is upset about $11 Doritos and they're upset about it because they can't believe it's $11, they don't have $11. They really wanted Doritos. They know they shouldn't have them. But if they're that upset about this, if I take that character and put them in a different situation, how does that influence things? It all ties together somehow. It's all about building relationships. It's all about building a bridge to your reader and connecting some dots. This is not easy. It is a lot of moving parts, but we handle them just like we handle everything else, one step at a time. On we go. Question number 3. I want to talk about this because this is one of those things that people on the internet love to talk about, but nobody really puts their finger on. I want to talk about pacing. Oh my God, what about my pacing? Is my pacing too fast? Is my pacing too slow? And nobody ever stops and like talks about what it is. They just talk about how you have to have the right pacing. So pacing, if we're going to define it, pacing is a metronome. It's the rate at which the reader stays engaged scene to scene, but also within a scene. You know what a metronome is, right? It's a thing that counts time to help musicians and stuff. Tick tock, tick tock. Think about a second hand. It's a metronome. It's a passage of time. It's a way to measure things. Now, here's the big giant secret about pacing and publishing. Most pacing problems will sort themselves out once you figure out how to connect your scenes together. Rushing, moving from thing to thing, hurrying up. Oh my God, more is happening, more stuff, more characters, more. That's bad pacing because we're rushing. The reason why you're probably rushing is because you haven't figured out how to connect these things and connect them effectively. You have not created, if we're going to go all the way back to the beginning, you have not created effective utility. Most pacing problems sort themselves out. Overthinking, over-engineering that pacing, super common, also super fixable. Most pacing problems can be resolved by going back to the scene or multiple scenes and go one scene at a time and go, okay, what's happening here? How do we straighten that out? One scene at a time. So here's our example. And here is our exercise. We want to think, whenever we deal with pacing, we want to look at pacing as a chain, as a series of events, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And we move from these events inside the scene or from scene to scene overall, but we move from event to event. Technically, they're called elements, but we can also call them events. No one's here to grade us. We move from each of these things, each element, when we have successfully, to our opinion as a writer, when we have successfully said everything we need to say. Remember, we're not trying to get 100%, so we don't need to cover every last blade of grass on the lawn, but we definitely have some amount of information to convey. And then when we're done, we go to the next one, some amount of information to convey, and then the next one. And hopefully we find a way to link each of the elements together in a what's called a progressive fashion. One, A to B to C to D. Here's the magic trick that's going to pull all your pacing together. And I don't think I've ever actually put this into anything recorded. I know I've said it on the newsletter, but I'll say it here. The magic trick for pacing is emotion. If you can understand what characters feel and how they feel while a thing is happening, and you understand that they're going to have a reaction and that something else is going to happen as a result, your pacing will sort itself out magically. So let's look at our example and you'll see what I mean. So we're starting with, there are 4 images and we're going to basically move clockwise because I couldn't figure out how else to orient the pictures. So we get a woman. She's got her arms crossed, her hip cocked. She's very clearly displeased in her body language. And her date, partner, spouse, whatever, the person she is with, a guy, has started walking away from her. There's a car in the background. So my suggestion would be that this is a scene where she was either going into the car, going out of the car, and she's upset, but the guy is walking away. If we can nail down her emotional state, judging by her body language, she is unhappy. And looking at this guy and the kind of face he's making, he's probably an asshole in this scene. So if we can nail down their emotional state, we can start figuring out just this quarter of what we need to communicate. If that woman who's upset is our main character, we are going to spend a lot of time, many sentences, explaining just how pissed off she is. Now, I'm assuming we're going to spend sentences. We could do this in one sentence. It's not a race, but we definitely want to make sure that we get across, hey, this lady's upset. And we don't want to be as simple as saying, you know, lady is upset, whatever her name is. We want to set this up so that we go from emotion to emotion to emotion to emotion all the way through. She's upset. He's walking away. Let's go to our second image. She's clearly got her hand out. She's gesturing and he's turned back to her with his hands out like, what? Huh? What the hell's he's making what I would generally summarize as the I don't understand why you're upset face, which is the kiss of death in an argument. At least pretend like you have a clue why the other person is upset. But so she's gesturing and he's making a what the big deal face. And now we can see his emotion. Yeah, I don't give a shit. This is no problem to me. But we have her pre-existing emotion from the previous one. She's pissed. So first one, she got pissed. Second one, she reacted. She expressed her emotion. Her expression gave him a reaction of, I don't see why this is a big problem. Then from there, that prompted another reaction. She was, said something back to him. This is how an argument happens. Then we get to the third one. She moves on. She says something. So he puts his finger up kind of dismissively or gestures or at least changes his body language to get more aggressive in some way, shape, or form. And then that prompts number 4, where she's standing there in shock and he's just kind of like, oh, whatever, throw my hands up and move on. 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Emotion to emotion to emotion to emotion. Now, this might be done in a paragraph where we dedicate 1 sentence per element. That's totally fine. Totally super fine. But it might not be. It might be an issue of understanding that we want to focus the reader in a certain way to relate to a certain character. If she's our main character, we're going to paint her favorably because she's our main character. We want to sympathize. And he's maybe not our villain, but he's definitely a jerk. So we want to make sure we get that across. Your pacing is how effectively, with how much utility we move from thing to thing to thing to thing. We can't adjust pacing while you're still writing. You just can't, because you haven't seen all the pieces yet. If we deleted one of these pictures, like let's say we only wrote 1 and we haven't done 2 yet. Well, we don't know how fast or slow we're going. We haven't seen the whole picture yet. We can only deal with pacing in revision. We can only deal with pacing during editing. All you can do while you're writing is hope. And that's fine. It's okay to have that be an unknown. It's not the end of the world. It's scary. It can be an issue, but it's one of those things that you won't know how good the food is till you eat it. You won't know your pacing issues until you work on them, but you can't work on them until everything's out, till everything's on the page. Make sense? It's it's one of those things the internet loves to talk about because it sounds like you know what you're talking about. It's pacing. It's a very serious thing, and it can be. But it's just a thing. It's just one more gas pedal. It's just one, element. Is spine the emotion of a scene? It can be. Spine can be an emotion in the same way that actions can be a spine. There's loads of, like, there's no one thing that's a spine. For me, I will often steer towards emotion because it's easier for me to, like, I know those things because I know the characters. But if you want to make this about actions, about gestures, about big deal things like, I'm going to throw a fireball at that guy's face and the other guy is going to shoot his gun, sure, go for it. Whatever you want to do. But the idea is that there is a spine of some kind that is not only talking. Why? Like we just talked about before, plot doesn't live in dialogue. So we want to leave our talking open to be a reaction to everything else. But there's always a spine. And it can be different because you and I could write the same scene differently. I might frame this around how she's upset, he doesn't give a shit. She says something, he gets angry, he storms off. You might write it around expectation, whereas spine is that she's hoping this goes well and he doesn't think it will, or she doesn't think it will and he is. But we could find lots of different ways to connect these dots. But there is always some way to do it. That's the point. Questions? What? I got to click the thing. Questions? Things to keep in mind for this. Somebody's feelings will always lead to actions based on those feelings. I feel this way, whatever it is, so I'm going to do something. Nobody acts independent of their emotional state. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. I don't care what it is. Those two things are always working together. And think about what starts, as in, like, how does it begin? But also think about how it ends. I know we're going to start with the two of these people getting out of the car. And I know it's going to end with the two of them walking, like one of them upset and walking away angry. Okay, there's my beginning. There's my end. I know the framework. I just have to fill in the pieces. Pacing comes after the fact. Just focus on what the characters are doing and feeling. And I swear to you, with enough time and just sort of smoothing out the sentences, pacing will come. Really and truly. I would not stick you out on a limb if I didn't think so. Pacing is an editing issue more than a construction issue. It's how you wrote it, not what you wrote. On we go. Okay. What you're looking at on the screen is a chart. This is a complicated chart that I'm about to try and make as simple as possible. Let's say we have four things: A to B to C to D. When we're thinking about how to move from each element, A to B, and then B to C, and then C to D, we have to remember that the further along we go, the more we bring baggage with us. So when we go from A to B, there has to be some kind of relationship between A to B, not just, time passes or not just cause and effect. There's always depth to these relationships. So in our example, they get out of the car. That's A. B, they start talking and he blows her off. What's the relationship there? Well, he's expressing frustration. She's trying to express frustration in some way, shape, or form. There's always a relationship from element to element. But now let's go one step further. When we go from A to B to C, we're no longer only going B to C. We're also bringing A along with us. So now it's A plus B going to C. The same is true when we go to D, that we will be doing A plus B plus C leading to D. Think about this like a staircase, if that helps. We can only get to D by stepping on C, which also stepped on B, which also stepped on A. This is called additive pacing because we're adding things up. This used to be called baggage theory in the 70s because you just bring the baggage of the previous elements forward. I don't know why they changed the name. I was a child when this theory came out. But the idea is that there's an individual relationship between elements and the cumulative effect of each element going forward. So in your own work, if you have, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D is child winning the spelling bee, or kid becoming a better student, or ninja training montage, or ninja going out and defeating their enemies. A, B, C, and D might be 4 different parts of that process. And one relationship is that all these things happen forward in time. First they do A, then they do B, then they do C, then they do D. But there's also other relationships. You know, in a training montage, we only get to B, C, and D once we demonstrate that A is going well. It's additive, remember. And yeah, if you're out there listening to this and go, well, if it's additive, is there also subtractive? Yes, but that's where things get like far more complicated. And I'm trying to keep this simple. Most of the time, relationships are additive. I will at some point cover additive and subtractive individually because they get real messy real fast. And I would have to draw more charts, and I'm not very good at drawing charts, but it'll get there. For now, to summarize this stuff, we want to focus on the way we connect A to B, and then A to B to C, and so on. Always think about the relationship and progression from one thing to the next. Not how fast it comes, not how, oh shit, I better hurry up because the book's, I'm running out of words. Nope. Just think about in the world of these characters in this moment, how do I go forward? And I swear to you, I promise you, that's going to be more than enough. On we go. Item number 4. I am really glad I poured more tea. Item number 4. How to cover what a character is thinking. This is also called internals. I don't particularly care for that name. It sounds weird to me. So I will always refer to it as, here's how to cover what's going on inside a character's head. Here are their thoughts. Here are their feelings. And I wrote you a blurb. The short form of this is that this is a lot like dialogue. It's a reaction. And that there is always a context or a reason that's triggering a feeling, making it reactive. And it should never only be one single label. It should never just be sad or never just be happy. That's fine when our reader is younger and the writing is simple, like a kid's book. Totally fine to say Billy is sad in like a basic learn to read book. Sure, very easy because there's a picture to go along with it. But when we're writing just prose, just text, we want to stay away from just big, broad labels because they are not as accurate and not as useful. They have low utility as other stuff. Because if I just go sad, you, the listener, will plug in everything you think about when you think about sad. And maybe half of that isn't what I mean. Because I have a picture in my head. I know what I mean, but it's my job to get that across to you. It's like that bookcase example we started with over an hour ago. If I just say bookcases, you plug in whatever picture you have, which is not what I want you to do. Always look for context. We talked about context before. This is where it becomes important. There's always a reason. There's always something that has prompted what a character is thinking and feeling. Now, maybe that prompting is because of plot. Maybe that prompting is because of dialogue. Maybe that prompting is because the volcano erupted. Maybe that prompting is because they're stuck in traffic. But there's always a because. Always. Every time. If you can find the because, you can build a relationship. We've been talking about relationships between things for a while. You can find a relationship between that person and the because, and you'll get a better idea of what that character should be, could be, and would be thinking. I'm somebody, we'll use me as an example. I'm somebody who hates traffic. I don't like it. It makes me frustrated, makes me angry. Doesn't make me anxious, makes me angry. I want to get where I want to get. People are in my way. I don't really like waiting. Again, because I'm anxious, but that's a separate issue. But if I'm in traffic, I want you to feel frustrated because I'm frustrated. So I will convey to you how irritated I was. Traffic is the trigger prompting my emotion of frustration. There has to be a why when we write. Why is the character anxious? Why are they crossing the street? Yes, absolutely. These things, the internals, the thoughts and feelings the character has, helps get us to the why. But we never only want to spell the why out. You never really want to come out and go, here is why the character crosses the street when they see the bully. Again, great when we're talking to kids, really clear. But normally we want to try and spruce it up a little bit. So we want to make the why sort of the unspoken summary. The unspoken summary is an idea where we have, once you're done reading the thing you're reading, you can summarize it in your head. Oh, John's frustrated. That's why he's talking the way he is about traffic. You drew that conclusion. That conclusion is the unspoken why. Leave the unspoken why for the reader to get. All you need to do is give them all the pieces. So find the why and work backwards. How is tension built within a scene if everything is additive? Is a question I just got a text message about. Like this. Tension comes from two sources. And we're going to get a little technical here. Hang on. Tension comes from two sources: expectation and opportunity. Expectation is how I think a thing is going to go. Expectation says, I think it's going to go this way, and it either will or it won't. Opportunity is my ability to influence expectation. So I think this could go well if I convince this person of this idea. So my opportunity is to, keep talking until they go, oh, I get it. Opportunity, expectation builds tension. Oh God, will the monster get me? I'm hiding in the haunted house from the monster. The tension source is, oh God, the monster is going to get me. The expectation is, oh God, the monster, I could die. The opportunity is, I have to hide. That's going to add together. My actions are going to add together to give me a sense that I need to hide from the monster. And we can kind of put a bow on this by saying, why is the character hiding? Because they don't want to be eaten, because they're afraid of being eaten. And we know they're afraid of being eaten because we're trying to build their internal structure, their thoughts, as links in a chain that prompt or lead to thoughts or feelings. I'm afraid. I feel afraid the monster is going to get me. So that changes my behavior. I act in a way that demonstrates to you that I'm afraid. Maybe maybe I'm very jittery. Maybe my knees are knocking. Maybe I stammer. Maybe I'm crying. Maybe I'm constantly looking left and right, and maybe I'm crouching down and I'm hiding behind the furniture. You should be able to look at my actions and infer what prompted those actions. Why is John hiding behind the couch? Oh, right, the monster. You don't have to be in my head, though if you were in my head, I wouldn't necessarily be having the thought of hide behind the couch, hide behind the couch, hide behind the couch, as though I'm a robot completing a basic program. My thoughts would be about things that suggest fear. Oh God, I can't stop thinking about how the monster just ate Billy in the other room. Oh no. It's all part of a chain of events and a chain of actions and a chain of prompts that clue the reader in to what a character is thinking. People, you listening to this, watching this, you have thoughts in your head. I know you do. You're a person. Chances are your thoughts are never explicit about the thing you're doing. You're often probably thinking about the end result. Oh man, I'm so hungry, I'm going to make a sandwich, because you haven't eaten yet. But when you're in the middle of making the sandwich, you are not thinking, okay, I have to get one piece of bread and then another piece of bread and then some cold cuts and then some cheese. Like, you're not thinking mechanically. You are thinking about how good the sandwich is going to be because you're making it. You focus on the emotional fuel, the emotional source that is prompting your thoughts, that is having the character do whatever they're doing. Always go back to the emotion. Always go back to whatever is laying underneath the action they take. Always aim for the why is probably the easiest way to say that. And it's not because the reader is going to constantly be hyper vigilant and ask about the why. Why are they doing that? Why did he put his left foot forward? Why? No. No. It doesn't matter if they start on the left foot or the right foot when they're running away from the monster. The issue is that they're running away from the monster. It's not a matter of elements of like, well, does the monster represent, the encroachment of women's suffrage in the early 20th century? No, it's a monster. They're running. So is it like in movies with show, don't tell? Let the story develop, have the plot and character action, let the reader piece everything together. I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong. You're not getting it wrong. You're seeing part of the big picture here, Pete. You're doing a great job. You're not totally wrong. You've got a couple term things in the way. Show don't tell is not a, well, if you go watch some stuff on YouTube from me, you'll see that show don't tell is a thing, but it's not the right kind of thing. You want the story to develop. You want to have the characters doing the plot. You don't want the characters explaining, here is why I am doing this part of the plot, because that's weird. But you want the characters' actions to let the reader have a chance at piecing everything together. That part's right. You got that part solid. Good job. But the point, overall, big picture stuff, is that sometimes you're going to show it, and sometimes you are going to tell in some way. It doesn't always mean that every telling is always, I am doing this because of whatever. Sometimes telling is just being decisive. I should probably, you know what I'm going to do? Where's my legal pad? We are going to do, I should just commit and just do show versus tell, like flat out. Let's put that on the pad and we'll turn that into a thing. Maybe we'll do that next week. Show versus tell. Let's do that next week instead of a chat. That'll be really good. That'll make people on social media very excited. Oh, thank you so much for signing up, Pete. I really appreciate that. I'll be happy to help you. That's great news. Thank you, Pete. You made my day. Good job, Pete. That's awesome. Super awesome. All right. I got to get more tea. I've been talking for like an hour and 20 something minutes. All right. Rock and roll. So we're building links in this chain, right? Character feels a certain way. They very rarely, but they can very rarely say, I feel this way, and stop there. I feel happy. I feel sad. Oh God. Usually there's a cause. We have a picture on screen of, and so this is a stock photo of somebody who just lost a lot of money with Bitcoin. That's what I searched for. I think it was lost money Bitcoin. I just typed it into a stock photo search and it gave me this photo. And it's great. It's a guy. He's staring in disbelief at his laptop. He likely, in the moment that he exists in, because he's our character, he probably would not have the thought verbalized as, oh my God, I cannot believe I have lost all this money thanks to Bitcoin. Because nobody thinks their words that way. That's strange. Most people think much smoother and much more abbreviated in their heads because they're in their own head. So he, instead of, oh my God, I cannot believe I lost all that work, he might be thinking more like, oh shit, I can't make rent. See the difference? It's significant in the words we put on the page, but the idea is the same. You want to go down and dig into, okay, so here's the thing the character is experiencing. They are currently watching their laptop and the little line goes down and the number is getting small and they need the number to go up. So the situation's bad. You, as the writer, want to put yourself in the character's position. So just picture yourself here now, staring at a laptop when, oh my God, I need this number to go up. I need to make money. I need this. And then the reality is, oh God, I'm losing money. How would you feel? Got that feeling? Can you feel it? We're making this up, so you don't have to be like super precise. But if you can get you in that headspace, you know what the character is thinking. If it were the question you want to ask, and this is particularly true for your own work, is if it were happening to me, what would I feel? And how could I express it if it were happening to me? What would I say? What would I do? I'd feel anxious with a weight on my chest. Oh God, yeah. There'd be a whole, it would feel, the way I've always described it, it's like somebody takes an ice cream scoop and scrapes right in the middle of my chest. It hurts. It feels hollow. The air becomes very difficult to breathe. It feels like somebody's sitting on me. The walls seem to move in a little, and I have a really hard time focusing on anything all at the same time. If you can find your response to a situation, and just so we're clear, fantasy people, if you're like, yeah, but what do I do with a dragon? Instead of thinking about a big giant dragon or, oh my God, I'm riding on a flying horse, think about what that situation translates to. Well, I'm on a flying horse and it's the first time the character has been on a flying horse. So I should be impressed by the speed. I could maybe feel free, the air moving through my hair, that sense of exhilaration, fear that I might fall off. I've never literally seen a dragon, but I imagine if I'm looking at something that is 30 times taller than I am and could possibly squish me, I'd probably feel worried that I don't want to get stepped on. You can always boil a situation down as fantasy novel or sci-fi novel or as plain old story as it might be. You can always boil it down to how you would react in the moment. But here's the trick. Here's the important thing. You need to be able to strip away the story knowledge to do it. So you need to think of that knight who's going to go fight the dragon, but you need to think about how it feels to fight the dragon. You need to not add, well, they're carrying the magic sword of +2 dragon killing. Because while that is true, they feel the feeling whether they hold the sword or not. So they might look at the dragon and go, yeah, I got the dragon killing sword. That'll help. But that thing's still 30 times taller than me. Maybe they feel overconfident because I got the dragon killing sword. What the fuck? Nobody's going to stop me. But we unplug the knowledge end of this because we're writing about feelings. So we're going to unplug the thinking and just focus on the feeling. How does a character feel? How do you feel in that situation? Now, maybe we let the knowledge of stuff seep into our brain just a little. Give it a little like, not, well, I'm carrying the sword. I'm wearing armor. But you don't have to know what it feels like to wear chainmail. I'm not asking you to go out and try to replicate the weight or the scratchiness of armor or whatever. I'm just trying to get you to find the character's feeling and let that be at least 90% of it, with information, maybe 10 if you want to sprinkle that in. Go to your emotional palette and paint with those colors. If that leads you, listening to this or watching this, to feel like, oh shit, I don't know the first goddamn thing about my emotional palette, I hear you. It's hard. You need to be a little brave. You need to be a little vulnerable. You need to let yourself feel some feelings. That's tough, but I believe in you and I know you can do it. The idea overall is that emotion is going to dictate what a character thinks and feels, always. And sometimes that emotion comes with assumption, and sometimes that emotion comes with expectation, and sometimes that emotion comes with like certainty. Sometimes it comes with none of that. But there's always an emotion, and it's always doing some kind of driving. On we go. We can think about it this way. We have two people here. They are allegedly, according to the stock photos, talking to one another via laptop. We want to think about a couple things. What a character does is driven by 3 points. They are driven by a goal. Every character has a goal for everything they're doing. Here's why they're doing X. Here's why they're doing Y. Here's why she is typing. Here's why she is smiling. Here's why she is afraid of the monster. Here's why he is running away from the earthquake. There is always a goal. I got to get away from this. I got to change this. I got to do this. I want that. I want to win the lottery. There's always a goal. It is objective. We can point to it. The character always has an emotional state. They always feel a certain way. It might be at that moment. It might be influenced by how they felt 5 minutes ago, but there's always an emotional state. And third, if you're a client, you've heard me talk about this before. Every character has a moral code. Every character has a philosophy. Every character believes in certain stuff. I don't mean like big picture, they believe in this God or they believe in this magic stuff, but every character has a set of rules they live by. The rules they live by dictate the actions they take to accomplish their goals. For instance, a really clear example I use is somebody might want a promotion at work. That's their goal. But their moral code might mean they just work hard and try to get noticed by their boss. But somebody else with a different moral code might just kill the person who's their competition for the job. That's a different moral code. Your moral code dictates what actions you will and won't take. And you think about your moral code. That moral code comes from somewhere. Somebody installed it in you, taught it to you. You picked it up from just where you were and who's around you, your people, your family, your society, your whatever. You got a moral code, or you built it yourself. You watched this, you read this, you picked this up. You made these rules for yourself. Those rules help steer you towards your goal, and your emotional state sort of gives you a sense of how that journey's going. Man, I just want to get like, one of my goals for this was to have 5 people watching a stream, because that hasn't happened in like a year. My goal was to get 5 people watching a stream. Allegedly, I came close at 4, but the number is always a slightly off. But at 5 people, my moral code says do everything I can, go over, above, and beyond to make sure 5 people have their minds blown by information. My emotional state has been, aside from, coughing and worrying that I'm going to keep coughing, my emotional state's been pretty anxious because I go through most of my workday pretty anxious. But my goal is unwavering, unchanging. I'm going to do my best to knock somebody's socks off with this. Because of that, because of those 3 things, my internal thought process is constantly cycling me towards my goal. How do I get to that next step? I got to keep my goal in mind. I don't have to constantly tell myself my goal. because I know my goal and it hasn't changed. So I don't have to constantly go, remember, John, you want to impress people. Remember, John, you want to impress people. But what you wanted to do was stay focused to your goal. So my actions move me that way. I say this, I click this button, I do this. I stop and I think about what to say, and then I say that. And I connect the dots on my why. Why is it important to me? Or the need of it to happen. I need this to work because I want writers to put books on my shelves, because I want clients, because I want to grow my business, because I want to see people feel like they can be empowered to write the thing they never thought they could. I want people to write better than they ever thought they could. That's important to me more than anything else. So you find those three things: your goal, character's emotional state, character's moral code, their personal philosophy, whatever you want to call it. Find those three things. Understand that those three things shape what a character thinks every time, anytime. So you can reach for those as the building blocks for what your character is thinking and feeling. Now, you don't always have to communicate them one step at a time. Nobody sits down and goes, here are the 11 things my character believes, because that's weird. But you want to be able to draw on them as you need when you're developing your character. On we go. Number 5. Ooh, number 5. Theme. Theme is, again, one of those things that when we talk about writing advice, everybody says, you need a theme. You got to have a theme. And it's true. You need a theme, especially when you're going to publish traditionally. If you're going to go get an agent and you're going to get published traditionally, you're not going to publish it yourself. You need a theme, or else you will get rejected. Flat out, period. I don't care how good your story is. You need a theme. Ideally, you need 1 to 2, maybe 3 most, but you need one. You need theme. So what the hell's a theme? The theme is the lesson you want the reader to take away from the story when they're done reading. It's never just like one part of the story. It's never just one scene in the story. It shouldn't be, ideally. It's never just one event that happens. It's a string of things. Remember, we've been talking about links and chains a lot. Theme is a lesson, an idea, and it's expressed in pieces over the course of the story. Theme adds depth and weight to what you're writing. It is not a subplot. Let me just answer that and make that clear, because I read a really irritating thing on, I think it was Twitter the other day, and I want you to hear me when I say this. Theme is not subplot. Your theme can be expressed during a subplot. The subplot can be in the story and it can illustrate theme, but you can't, they're not synonyms. They're different things. Remember those stories you used to hear as kids, like slow and steady wins the race, a tortoise and a hare, all those things where you have morals? Themes are like those. We want to make sure we can identify a theme in your story, any story. The theme of this, the theme of that. Now, maybe there's more than one. It's not uncommon for there to be more than one. And these themes can be in the main plot. They can be in the subplot. They can be in both. But they gotta be there. Think about a theme as like a river that runs underground. So here's the ground. Here's your story. This is your characters doing stuff. They go over here, they go over there, they try to solve this plot. They try to deal with the bad guy. They try to win the contest. They try to figure out who did the killing. There's a story. While all that's happening, while all those characters are doing whatever it is they're doing, however many characters, however many things, fantasy story, sci-fi story, murder mystery, romance novel, doesn't matter. While all these things are happening to all these made up people, there's something underneath that connects the elements of your story beyond the fact that they all happen in this book. A theme. Something like, let me think of a really nice, easy theme. How about a theme of standing up to a bully? Or never trust a cop. Those are themes. We don't necessarily want to have one single scene where the theme is totally and outright only stated and it never exists anywhere else in the book, because that's going to feel really forced. And we don't want this to feel forced. We want to feel like we know what the hell we're writing. So we come up with a couple different pieces of our story. It's this scene over here. It's that scene over there. It's this moment over here, that all share something in common. And the thing they share in common is the theme. Theme weaves story elements together. Even if those things have nothing to do with each other in the plot, there's some kind of relationship between them. Chances are that's going to be theme. So if we have a theme like stand up to a bully, you might have scenes where, early on in the story, the bully bullies the kid. And the bully makes the kid feel small and beats him up, maybe. And the kid gets angry and he tries to fight back, but he just ends up getting, whooped on. So the kid goes to like I don't know, he wants to like buy a gun, he wants to do something, rugged and tough, but he can't because he's, he doesn't have the money or whatever. But maybe he meets the janitor of his condo complex who promises to teach him karate. So now he learns confidence and he learns how to be, I don't know, a ninja turtle, like a ninja or something. And then he can go fight the bully in the end and kick him in the face and win a karate tournament and overcome his bully. There's lots of different scenes along the way that reveal to us the theme of standing up to a bully is important. Or you can learn to believe in yourself, but also along the way stand up and kick your bully in the face. Find your theme. It's there. And if it's not there, we need to have a conversation about how to put it there, which means you need to stop and think at some level about what kind of message you want to convey to the reader, other than just, well, in my story, character A does blah, 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 blah. That's not enough. We have to go deeper than the made up people in the made up world with their made up problem. A lot of writers struggle with that. A lot of writers don't think about it. They in fact take it too far. They think they need to like have a theme where, this butter dish represents 1840s Europe. No, I mean, it can, that's fine, but that's not a theme. That's subtext. That's the layer under theme. Most times, don't sweat subtext, especially when you're learning how to do this. That's overcomplicating it. That's like saying, I want to learn how to ride a bike and then like next week joining the Tour de France. It's too far. There's a whole level of skill there. Or I just bought my first basketball. I'm gonna go take on LeBron one-on-one. There's a whole world of difference there. Just go to theme. What lesson do you want the reader to walk away with? What we want to do in our own work for theme is look at our list of scenes. Look at what's going on. Look at what the overall end result of a scene is. Okay, so the kid goes and learns karate from the janitor. Cool. What's the end result of that? Well, the end result of that is the next morning he learns that he has to, paint the house and wax on and wax off and all that shit. Okay, fine. And what else does that get us though? He gets frustrated because he just sees it as chores. He doesn't really see it as karate. But then all of a sudden, the guy starts, throwing punches and kicks, and he starts seeing that the moves, wax on, wax off, paint the house, all that stuff, the moves were the karate this whole time. And he starts realizing, oh shit, I know karate. And then he feels more confident. And he feels like he can take on his bully, because that's the theme of our fucking story. We want to find ways to link elements, stuff in our story together. One step at a time. It's never on one step to do all the work. This piece plus that piece plus that piece plus that piece ties everything together. So ask yourself, what is my story about? So if we look at our examples here, if we look at, so that in the first corner, we have John Wick, the first movie. You could say that this story is about, you know, Russian mobsters kill a guy's dog, so he has to murder all of them. You could say that John Wick is about, hey, don't kill dogs. You could. Sure you could. It's not. I mean, it's precipitated. The story kicks off by the death of a dog, but you got to dig deeper. You got to think a little bit more. John Wick is a story of revenge predicated on how, you can lose the life you want in an instant, and sometimes that brings you back to the life you thought you left behind. They killed my dog. Now I got to murder all these people. I guess I'm back being the super hitman I was before. In our second picture, we have Frodo and the ring. That is not the story of two guys who walk across New Zealand. You could summarize it like that. We could be funny about it, sure. But it's a story about temptation. It's a story about resistance. It's a story about courage. In our next picture, we have a shot from American Fiction, which is a movie we're going to cover next week on Patreon. And it's, if you don't know what it is, it's an adaptation of a novel where an author is upset that the kind of story that's popularized does, he feels, a disservice to his community, to his race, to his people, to the way he perceives the world. You could say that American Fiction is the story of an upset writer, partially, but it's also about coming to terms with how one group in society recognizes or perceives another group. In the story for American Fiction, basically it's the idea that white people really only see black people as thugs or slaves. And those are the popularized stories. And we have a very limited view of the black experience as white people. And the challenge there is to, see it bigger than that. In the fourth picture, we have Andor from Star Wars, and it's a moment where Aunt Petunia from that transphobic Magic Wizard school story is she's a hologram, and she's giving basically her own sort of eulogy. Andor is the best piece of Star Wars I've ever seen in my life. There's a whole video on the YouTube channel about it. It's rad. But the point of Andor isn't just, hey, we need to connect the dots between this happening in Star Wars and that happening in Star Wars. Andor is the story about how somebody becomes a rebel, how somebody really learns to stop being selfish and become part of a greater cause bigger than themselves. So ask yourself, not the plot, what is my story about, though? What's it about? It's the story of a guy getting his shit together. It's a story of a lady learning to love when she thought she was unlovable. It's the story of four nerds who decide they're going to make a YouTube channel because they want to grow and put their voices into the world. What is your story about? That question is going to give you so much insight into what your themes could be, what your plot needs to be, who your characters are. It is a critical question. On we go. Now I'm going to talk some shit about a thing. So buckle up. This is Saltburn. It's a really popular movie, allegedly, on Amazon. Saltburn is trash. It's a horrible movie. Don't watch it. When you mess up your theme, when you swear your theme is one thing, and in reality it turns out to be something else, or that you keep telling everybody, oh, my theme is this, whatever it is, and you never get there. When you don't have a theme, or you misunderstand your theme, your story is a waste of time because it doesn't tie together. Yeah, it's a plot. Yeah, stuff happens. But it doesn't do anything past that. It becomes disposable. It's fast food. It's popcorn. I'll eat it and I'll be full for a little bit, but it's not going to hold me over till later. It's just going to be kind of like, ugh. I'm glad I'm done. Saltburn really, really desperately wants to be the talented Mr. Ripley. Like, nearly line for line, word for word, scene for scene. It really wants to be The Talented Mr. Ripley, either the original book or the Matt Damon version from the early 90s or the new version coming out with Andrew Scott. It really wants to be The Talented Mr. Ripley. The creator will swear up and down that they don't, but that's because they got caught out and straight called out, and they got their spot blown up, and all of a sudden, oh shit, wow, they nailed me. And they floundered. Saltburn really wants to be The Talented Mr. Ripley. Just go watch The Talented Mr. Ripley. It's way better. But when you miss your theme, you end up being a very pale, very crappy imitation. And Saltburn feels like The Talented Mr. Ripley if you gave a bunch of people an over the phone summary of the Wikipedia paragraph about the plot. Like if I badly summarized a thing at a distance, yeah, maybe you'd pull off Saltburn. Don't neglect your theme. That's why when we're developing our novel, when we're writing whatever it is, theme is like the second thing we think about, maybe the third, but mostly it's right in the top three. Theme really, really matters because we want to make sure it's present and constant and active in our story. It isn't the same as like, oh, it's summer, a simple weather decision that just dictates a simple detail. Theme is a baseline. It's a foundational element. On we go to our last thing we're covering today, because we've been talking now nearly 2 hours. I really appreciate your time. Last element, how to write in a stronger voice. This one, I don't think I've ever said anywhere. I think I maybe wrote one thing about it on the old blog, maybe. But you're going to want to write in as an effective a voice as possible. Not necessarily the briefest, not necessarily the most clear or sterile, just in a voice that conveys the story to the degree and in the way you want. Voice is different than point of view. They're not the same thing. I know the internet just had a whole thing on Twitter about that today, but hey, guess what? You're wrong. Voice and POV are not the same thing. There's two voices. There's narrative voice, which is how the story reads, how the story is told to you by the writer. And there is authorial voice, which is how the author, like the soapboxes and the points that the author wants to make. Narrative voice is tied to pacing, like we talked about before. It's how the story rolls out across the pages. And authorial voice has to do with theme and all those other non-plot kind of elements. Think about it this way. Narrative voice is what the story is. Authorial voice is what the author wants you to know or feel. You're going to always have both. So when we really split hairs on this and really get technical about it, there's this idea that, well, why is your story about a kid learning karate and standing up to a bully? Well, that's because the author has a point they want to make about you should stand up to bullies. So in those scenes, the narrative might be around the kid learning karate, gaining confidence and stuff, but there's an under the surface, unwritten, unspoken, authorial voice that is suggesting, hey, you should stand up to bullies. Use this kid as your example. Do what this kid is doing. Maybe not learn karate from a janitor, but like see how they're improving themselves and they're gaining confidence so that they can stand up to the obstacles in their life. That's the authorial voice. We talked before about the why. Why is a character doing this? What is the why of the story? Well, now there's a why with the author. Why is the author saying what they're saying? Why have these scenes? Why not just give the kid in the, with the bully, why not just give him a bazooka? Because that'll solve the problem. It's really hard to be bullied when you get blown up. But that's not the point the author wants to make. That's not the story the author wants to tell. That's not valuable for the authorial voice. You, right there, listening to this, watching this, hearing this on the podcast, seeing this on YouTube in the future or whatever. You have something you want to say. Not just, I made up a story with space hamsters and a romance with boats. You have something bigger to say. You have feelings and views on the world. And part of what you are doing in writing this book, however long you've been writing this book, whether this is day 1 or like day 50, part of this is what you want to say. Authorial voice is how you communicate it. It's hard, but you can do this. It sounds complicated, and it can get complicated, especially when you start overthinking, but you can do this. What we're left with is that voice is developed by the decisions you make, and how one thing in a story can do more than just be that thing. So our example here is Ken from the Barbie movie. On one level, a narrative level, Ken is a character in the story. He is Barbie's friend. At one point, he is an antagonist in the story because his goals are directly in opposition with Barbie's goals. So, from a narrative perspective, Ken serves several narrative functions. He is a secondary character. He's a sidekick at one point. He's a love interest at one point. He's an antagonist at one point. He's also a main character, depending on how you want to frame part of the story. The authorial side, though, has depth. Ken's arc, Ken's presence in the story, is that he, at some level, and because of the plot, represents patriarchy, represents sexism, misogyny, represents all these different things. Now, yes, the plot makes a joke of some of these things to make it more palatable, but there's another layer there. The reason why Ken's arc isn't just, I'm going to go buy an ice cream cone and do beach stuff, is because the writer has a point they want to make, and that's the authorial voice. How they illustrate the authorial voice is by using their narrative voice. The point I want to make is expressed through the story. How do you do this? How do you make this work for yourself? You have to make decisions. Remember, the first rule of writing, every client right now is rolling their eyes. First rule of writing is the act of making decisions. If you're new, hi, that's the rule. That's everything. Writing is the act of making decisions. Decide, choose. It's not about right and wrong. Just make a choice. We can always change it later. If you tell me the sky is orange, it's orange until you say otherwise. If you need to, have a fire breakout, you do not need to become a world famous arson investigator. We can just have a fire breakout. This is not about, writing a term paper where our facts will all be mega super checked. This is about you deciding that this is the story you want to tell. Writing is the act of making decisions. You, not the market, not your audience, not your pimp, that's your agent, not your publisher, not your, 5 followers on TikTok. They're not in charge. You're in charge. You're making the decisions because you're the one doing the writing. You make the decisions. You have, outside of the writing, views on the world. You might believe in this. You might believe in that. You might think this. You might disagree with that. You might think this is silly or this is great or whatever. You have points of view. You have an experience. You have a valuable element to contribute to existence. Not only in the fact that you're going to make up this story with made up people doing made up stuff. You as a human matter. Your point of view matters. The way you see things, what you believe in, how you express what you believe in. All that stuff matters. Your opinion matters. Now, if let's say, you're an asshole and you believe in, I don't know, Nazi shit, then there is a subset of people who will agree with you. And your views may have costs for expressing them. You might get punched in the face. We might disagree on many levels then, but your view is valuable because of who and what you are and how you are. It still matters. You need to find your views and let them work their way, weave their way into what you're writing, because your views are influencing your decisions, because your views are influencing how you decided to make this story, and your views on how you wanted to publish it influence how you further produce it. Make your decisions based on your views and your experience and your feelings. And lastly, you want to organize the hell out of everything: scenes, moments, feelings, atmosphere. This is not, just so we're clear, this is not like a demand for you to write 45 pages of backstory for the person who lives next door to the main character. This is not about coming up with the most details ever. Anybody who gets lost in the sauce on research is really just looking for a reason to not write. Chances are they are afraid of getting it wrong, so they're occupying themselves with busy work. You want to be productive and you want to be proactive here. Organization helps so that you can make more effective decisions, so that you can express what you want to say, so that you can tell your story. Your authorial voice is going to inform and affect your narrative voice. And it does work the other way around. How you're crafting your narrative, thanks to utility. Remember utility from 2 hours ago? Utility is going to allow you to say a thing or not say a thing based on how the story's going. You might have thoughts and feelings that you can't express in this book because of how you've written it. That doesn't mean you failed. It just means that this was not the moment where you got to tell the world that you really think, like, I don't know, birds are scary or something, because birds are terrifying. But you might have a point of view to get across, an idea to get across, but you just couldn't this time. Well, that's fine. Go write another story then. That's what we have multiple pages for. Organize based on your experiences and your views so that you can make informed decisions. And that's it. That's everything. 2 hours. One of the longest videos we've done in a long time over here. I want to thank each and every single one of you for being here. It means the world. Wonderful. So, questions about anything? I do want to point out this will be on YouTube, but it'll now be on YouTube like tonight. It'll take a couple hours because now the file is like not an hour, it's twice the size. So it'll take time, but it'll get there. And the audio will be up on the podcast feed. And, you know, this video will hang out on Twitch. If you're a Twitch subscriber, you can watch this forever. Questions about anything? Otherwise, we'll get out of here. No? Keep going? Thank you. Thanks for this. Thanks for letting me try something different than the usual Q&A. If you're new, every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, I usually do a Q&A. You can submit your questions on the Discord, which you can get through the Patreon. We talked about that at the beginning, patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better. Gives you a chance to go to the Discord, which will give you a chance to ask all the questions you want, and then I'll answer them here on a stream. If you want me in your ear every day for free, wherever you get your podcasts, go look for John Helps You Write Better. You'll get audio from this thing on there shortly. Every audio for every, writer's chat, it's on there. Every day I put something out. Every day. In fact, I still have to record for tomorrow. So I'm going to do that right after we do this. Neat. And if you want help with what you're doing, head over to johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com. Book an appointment, and I'll help you. Do whatever it is you want to do. Your first half hour is free, totally free. And I got to tell you, I'm terrible at time management, so don't be surprised if your free half hour turns into like a free 45 minutes. I want to help you write better, one tool at a time. This is how I do it. I hope you really liked this. I hope this was great. I hope this encouraged you. And if you want more, come on back. The next time I'm here in your eyes and in your ears streaming will be definitely on March the 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern. It is possible, always possible, that I'll do something else randomly, but you can always follow me on social media, Twitter, Discord, Patreon, newsletter. You can always follow me elsewhere for when I announce other stuff. But until then, until next week, take care of yourselves, do good writing, ask good questions, and keep going. Don't give up. All power to all people. And I'll talk to you soon. See ya.